Welcome back to this third video in our initial tour of SketchUp. We're going to be learning our second joint. Our first one, which we still have on the screen here, is our very basic butt joint, where we simply butt together, hence the name, two pieces of material. I already mentioned in the previous video that the next joint, the one we're about to learn now, is called a rebate joint. And the idea of a rebate joint is we are going to cut out a section or a rebate, hence the name, something that we take away there, and we're going to insert this piece, the one that we've currently got across the top, into that gap to create a stronger joint. That will be something that's going to be more or make more sense to you once you see it, and you might have already seen it in class with me or with your teacher before you actually do this video. But again, if you're just following the video, that's going to make a bit more sense in a moment. Now, in this video, I'm going to do this in two main ways. The first way is actually by reusing this joint that we already did, so we can learn a couple other skills in SketchUp. And then at the end, I'm going to do it again from scratch by not reusing this. I'm going to do it in a quicker way. I'm going to sort of go through it a bit more quickly, not explaining everything in as much detail, because the idea is if you're going to try that method, that you've already tried method one, and also you're feeling a bit comfortable or confident with SketchUp in general. So you might want to have a go at something that's maybe a little bit more advanced if you like. So focus on what I'm about to do now is the important way to do it in this case, and have a go if you want to at the second way in a moment. So before I begin, I'm not actually going to physically modify this. I want to keep my butt joint. So I'm actually going to go my 3-bar menu up the top and choose to go back to the home screen where I have all of my files. From there, I'm going to come to find my file. Here it is, the butt joint. And I'm going to click on the 3 dots to get my little menu. And you'll see that there is a duplicate option. So I'm going to choose that. It's going to duplicate that file. And if you've done it properly, you should get exactly the same thing with a 1 at the end, because you've already got an original file called that, and now you've essentially got a copy of it. I'm also going to click on the 3 dots and rename that file. And as I've said in earlier videos and in my class as well, I follow a naming convention, and that is your last name followed by your first name, followed by the piece of work that you're doing. And this one, as I've said a few times now, is called a rebate joint. So I'm just going to rename it. Rebate joint. Now, I've used SketchUp a lot, and I've already got a lot of files. Some of them are already called rebate joints. So I'm going to put a 2025 on the end of mine because that's when I'm doing this. You won't need to do that with yours because I very much doubt you've already got a file called your last name, your first name rebate. But if you do hit an issue where you ever have it and it says, no, you can't do this because it's already got one, again, obviously just pick a slightly different name. So I'm going to press OK. And after a moment, you'll see here we have 2 files, but this one has now been renamed. If I hold my mouse and just hover there for a second, you see the full name. I'm going to go into that by clicking on it, and here we are back in that, and it looks identical because it is. It's an exact copy of the file that we had earlier. As I said, I'm going to do this 2 ways. The first way is going to be reusing what we have here, very much like you might do in the classroom. Because these 2 pieces of material would be the first stage of making this practice joint with me. The second way will be more of a design way of doing it, but less like the real world making it. If that makes a little bit of sense, hopefully it does by the time you finish watching this. So the first thing I'm going to do is select this top piece and use my move tool that we've seen earlier and just literally move it out of the way. It's not important right now. What I want to focus on is this piece. What we're going to be doing, I'm just going to zoom in a bit closer to it. We're going to be cutting out a rectangular piece of this wood, or this material, I should say. It's not necessarily wood, it's just material. And for a rebate joint, what I teach certainly, and I would suggest this is the best way to do it unless there is a reason not to for the model that you're doing, is obviously you are going to come down by the same thickness of the material. So I know we said we don't need this piece, but I'm just going to bring it back for a second. So we would need to know this height, the thickness of the material, to work out how far down we're going to cut. And we need to then know the thickness of this piece, because we always go half. So again, unless you've got a reason to do it differently, it's always down or this way by the thickness of the other piece of material, because you want it to sit properly in there. And we always cut away half of this piece. And again, that's going to make more sense to you the more we get into this model. Now, one thing some of you might already be thinking is, hey, we're going to modify this, but earlier on we made this into a component. If I click on this one now, it's all selected, and I did mention what to do about that. See if you can remember. Hopefully you said that you need to double click on it to get the dotted lines. These dotted lines mean I'm modifying the pieces that make this component. And again, I know I said I don't need it too much, but the one that's hidden over here is sort of grayed out because we're not modifying that one. So here we are editing this particular shape. I did forget one thing, actually very, very important. I'm just going to click outside of that for a moment, all right? And I'm going to, actually no, I won't do that yet. I'm going to double click and let's edit it, and then I'll show you the mistake I've made at the end. So here I have this piece I'm going to modify. As I've said, I want to come down this way by the same thickness as the other piece, which we know is 19 millimeters. And then I want to cut half of this one out, which is also 19 millimeters. So of course, half of that is 9.5. So I'm going to start by introducing a new tool, which is my tape measure. And I can use that to draw what we call construction lines. They're temporary lines, a bit like using your pencil that you can then rub out later on, you can get rid of. But they're really useful for measuring things accurately. So what I'm going to do is take my tape measure, come along to this top line, and using some of the same ideas we talked about earlier, I can lock onto that line. So anywhere along here, either a corner, the midpoint, which it likes to show me, which is the middle, or anywhere along there, I can lock into it. Now, for what I'm about to do, I don't suggest you use an edge or a middle. There's reasons you'll see later on. Just anywhere else along it where you get that red shape. Click and hold and drag your mouse straight down. You want to make sure it stays on, in my case, the red axis. Don't go off onto some weird angle. All right, you want to come straight down. Let go of your mouse anywhere, doesn't matter. And just like before with other tools, we're going to type the distance we wanted. We wanted this to come down 19 millimeters. So start typing straight away. And again, notice in the bottom right corner, that box has now got 19. And when I press enter, my construction line moves to be exactly 19 millimeters down in the direction that I was moving. So that line now is perfectly drawn across that face or that surface, 19 millimeters down. Let's do the same from this edge, or it could be the other because we're going halfway. It doesn't really matter. Click anywhere on there. Make sure you're going straight across. In this case, it is my blue axis. I don't want to be going off on some random measurement somewhere. Blue axis across anywhere, doesn't matter. Let go. Type 9.5. Notice it down the bottom right, and then press enter. And I now have this shape properly drawn in. And this shape here is what I want to get rid of. But I can't use it the way it is now. These construction lines are not solid. They're literally dotted lines. So I'm going to introduce another new tool, and that is the very basic pencil tool. Pencil tool just draws a straight line between 2 points. So I want to basically turn this section and this section of these dotted lines into solid lines so that this becomes an actual shape. And again, I do that by locking into places. So again, you can see if I move across, it wants to join into this thing called an intersection, where the dotted line crosses over this straight line. So clicking that intersection once, move your mouse down, but basically you want to lock into this intersection where these two construction lines join across. Okay, you don't have to measure it now because we already did the measuring with the construction line. So click to turn that into a solid line. Now the line tool wants to draw from where you last clicked. So here, draw another line. So we're going to come across here to this intersection where the side and this construction line join together. All right, so that new intersection, and click again. And it's going to want to keep drawing more lines, but we're going to press escape at this point to finish that line segment. So we've drawn this line down here and this line across. And so this is now a full shape. There are no gaps as I go around this rectangle shape. So if I come and get my push-pull tool, and you remember earlier on, if you watched all these videos, I did this very quickly to demonstrate. here is a shape, but notice how the part I just drew has not highlighted because it's its own solid shape. Same as if I now highlight there, this could be modified without affecting the rest of it. And that's really, really important because what I'm going to do is click to push-pull that and push it out of the way, creating that gap that I've been talking about. And if I go all the way to the edge and let go of my mouse, it's actually gotten rid of that altogether. Let me just do that part again. Push-pull tool into the shape that I've measured out. It's the correct amount, so it's 19 millimeters down. It's half of the thickness, which is 9.5. I've created a full rectangle. Click and hold, push it out of the way, and just go all the way to the end until it's there and let go. All right, and that's how we can modify an existing piece. And I've now created that section that's going to sit in. And we're going to see that in just a moment. Before I do bring this other piece in, I just want to clean up. I want to essentially rub out these construction lines. So again, a new tool, you might have guessed it, it is the rubber. It lives up the top here. And I'm simply going to click and drag over that line. Notice it went blue. Click and drag over that line. It went blue and they went away. So we just cleaned up our space a bit. If I accidentally click and drag over other parts, I can delete parts out of my model, which I'll just undo. Of course, I don't want that to happen. So be careful where you click, and that's why I usually rub construction lines out way past the actual model itself. And the final thing at this point is to use our normal selection tool and just click outside the shape to close off the editing of this component. So anywhere else, I've now finished editing that shape. It's now one piece still, just with this piece cut out. All right, so let's bring this other piece back into it. So let's choose that piece that's living over here at the moment. Again, grab our tool for movement, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to take advantage of this corner needing to line up into here so that the whole thing ends up sitting and sticking out from the side. So let's grab that bottom corner like we did earlier, come across and just lock it in place with that corner there. And you can see how this perfectly fits in place. No matter where we look at it, it is perfectly lined up because everything was measured properly. Now you might at this point notice what I said was going to be the mistake, and that is it's also happened on this other piece. Because remember, right from the start, these two are exact copies of each other. So everything I did to this end of this piece was happening to the matching end of the copied piece. That could be really useful if you need that to happen, so you don't have to modify each piece separately, but also it can be a real problem. So how do we fix that? Well, this wasn't what I intended to be as a second thing, but I'm still going to move it out of the way. And at the moment, I'm literally going to quickly undo all the things I just did. All right, right back to the start here. Because what I'm going to do before I go any further is I'm going to select this second piece, right click on it, and I'm going to choose this thing called Make Unique. So originally they were copies of each other. Now this is a unique piece compared to that. And now it just means whatever I do to one is not going to be done to the other. So I'm very quickly going to redo everything I just did to this piece so you can see it. And I'm going to leave this one here so you can see it doesn't get modified. This is still not the second way I was going to demonstrate it. I will still do that at the very end. But I wanted you to see that you can make a mistake, obviously quite easily, but also it's not that hard to fix up. So very, very quickly, again, double click on here so that I'm editing this piece. That one's grayed out. I'm going to use my tape measure to do my construction line. So from this piece here, or this edge straight down, try that again, straight down, and I know that needs to be 19, type it in, and from this edge here, straight across, 9.5, lock it in. I'm going to use my line tool and the intersects to go from there to this intersection, and from there to this intersection. And now I'm going to use my push-pull tool to push that out of the way, creating the rebate that I wanted. Taking my selection tool again, just clicking outside of it so that, sorry, double click again. My apologies, I didn't rub out the construction line, so rub those out. Now use the selection tool, click outside of it, and you can see I'm back to having a rebate here, but nothing happened to the other piece because it was made unique earlier on. Like before, choose that piece, use your movement tool, grab that corner, and we're going to lock it into this corner here. So grab, hold, and literally lock it into place. So here I have my rebate joint. This piece, nothing actually happens to. It's just left alone. All the action, if you like, all the changes happen here, and this is the rebate that we're talking about. Okay, so just lock it back into place, and that is the model for your rebate. Now, I said I was going to do this another way, and I'm going to do that again really quickly for you now. Don't forget to press save, I should say, and it may or may not ask you to purge, which again, you know, is fine. I'm really quickly going to just open up a new one. I'm not going to spend a long time on it. I'm going to get rid of the guy, and I'm going to make sure that my length in units are millimeters and 0.0, just like that. So that's nice and easy. And I'm going to go about drawing this again without making a copy of the original file. So I'm going to start exactly the same way. I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle. I'm going to set my initial measurements. So it's 100 millimeters long by, 40 millimeters wide. I'm going to zoom into it just like I did in the first stage. I'm going to pull that up and make it 19. So you can see that whole process doesn't take long if you're not trying to explain it in great detail. I'm still going to make this a component. Okay, so right click after selecting everything, make component, and I will call this one rebate piece. Okay, create. Now, what I could do is exactly the same process, but it's not from an original copy. So I'm going to copy and paste that one over here. Okay, so I've still got one. I'm going to make that one unique again. So selection tool, right click, make unique, and do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to redraw the shape. So I can draw this one here. I can say, okay, take the tape measure. Sorry, I forgot for a second what I was doing. Let's go 19 millimeters down. Let's go 9.5. Exactly the same thing. Draw in that shape. All right. Take my push-pull tool, push it out. I've got exactly the same thing as I saw earlier. Rub out my construction lines and come outside of it so that I'm no longer editing. Exactly the same thing. I can rotate this one around. Now, because of the way I've done it, it's actually going to face the other way, but that's perfectly fine. I can choose this one. I'm going to rotate it around. So again, grabbing some points, and this time it's going to be 90 degrees in that way. And look, just to make it look the same, I'm going to spin the whole thing around so it looks a bit more similar for you. So there you go. I've got still the right piece. I'm going to grab this piece, and I'm going to move it by grabbing that corner and locking it in place. So again, I didn't copy what I already had. I started from scratch, but the basic steps were the same. I had to draw my basic shape and then cut the piece out. Where you cut it out from is up to you. I did it from looking on the side, but you could do it just as easily by looking from the top. So if I had this piece here, I could have drawn a rectangle along the top and pulled it down instead. I could have done a few different ways of actually making this. But at the end of the day, the idea is that you draw in a shape that you want to modify the original by, which in our case was this rectangle side here that we used to push it out of the way to remove some material. And you'll find when we do this in the workshop that in essence it's the same. We're going to mark it out in a very similar way, drawing those sort of construction lines on the wood, and we're going to use tools to remove this piece of material. We can't obviously push it out like we do in SketchUp. It's so much easier in the virtual space, but the idea is basically the same. So I hope that helps you with this one. Again, focus on the first option. By all means, have a go at drawing it from scratch if you'd like to. The more you practice any skill, including SketchUp, the better you'll get at it, the more you'll understand how the tools interact and how you can create something. So that'll be the end of this particular video. The next one we will do in this series will probably be called a housing joint. And then after that, we may move on to a finger joint as well. So if you are following along either from my classes at my school or externally, that's probably the next stages that we will go through.